Hey guys, today I'm going to talk about how breastfeeding led me to veganism. So, how breastfeeding led me to veganism. Um, when you're breastfeeding in the middle of the night, that's when, for me personally, that's when I did my deepest thinking, and that is such a precious time. You're looking down your newborn baby, and it's so silent, and the world is asleep, and you haven't had chances to really have intellectual stimulating conversations. So because you've been cocooning with the baby, and for me that's when I did my most profound philosophical thinking, and just staring down at this new baby, this new life that I just brought into the world. You start to think about what type of a world you want to help create, for this baby, and what's wrong with the world, and what's right with the world, and what role do we have to change what's not right. So it's also a very empowering time because you're providing your baby with, well, first of all, you just had a baby, so you have the power of just have given birth, and all of those instincts that come with it, and the heightened intuition and the hormones and all that stuff that's magical to help us have the best intuition for our newborns. And we're providing that baby with all that it needs to live. It's incredibly empowering. So I thought a lot about all these issues, and I was still at that point eating animals that wasn't really. I was really encouraging of the vegan movement, even though I wasn't ready for it myself. And I also just didn't really know the terrors of the dairy industry because, yeah, it was only until I was breastfeeding myself that I could start to sympathize with other species. So when I loved breastfeeding, it wasn't easy for me at first. It was, like most people, it was very hard. I went through 3 weeks of cracked skin and really painful. Like I couldn't put on a top or anything, and just had to work through that pain. And then finally, it did become easier and easier, and it became fine for me. But it was when I started to pump that didn't feel right for me. And that's when I started to sympathize with farm animals, that they're not hooked up to these like ergonomical like little contraptions while you're in bed watching your favorite movie. It's like they're hooked up to these industrial painful contraptions, machines, that and these are young mamas we're talking about, because they're artificially inseminated from the time that they can start to reproduce. So it's like you have these like pubescent cows getting artificially inseminated, and then their babies torn away, and then hooked up to these really painful machines for their entire life. So that really, really got me to, sympathize, like I said, but I was still consuming it myself, and throughout my first breastfeeding. And then for the second baby, I was breastfeeding both of my babies actually at that point. And I noticed that when I would have dairy, the newborn would get like explosive black diarrhea, like terrible, terrible stuff. And I had to do it a few times to really realize it was the dairy causing this. And I brought her to the doctor, and it turned out she was dairy intolerant. So that was like a blessing in disguise. That was then when she became when I realized she was dairy intolerant, I cut out dairy myself, and that's when I found the benefits of not eating dairy for myself. So, and that's also when I started to do research on the alternatives, and started to understand more that dairy wasn't, in fact, not only was it not important for us, it's not good for us, and that so many people around the world are living in they're suffering because they don't realize that they're dairy intolerant. So actually most of us are dairy intolerant. The fact that my baby was dairy intolerant was completely normal. Most babies are dairy intolerant because we are not designed to consume the fluids from other species breast milk. So that so we've evolved to handle it, it means that's a mutation. So that's more like the norm is to be dairy intolerant, and those of us who've evolved around dairy have, we've evolved to handle it. So that got me to stop eating dairy. Then it validated all my what I thought was wrong, and I was able to actually put it into action, and then to see the results that it felt amazing for myself as well. I cleared up my eczema, and well, it started to clear up through eliminating dairy, but it was still, until I did some other measures, it was still a little bit there. But I stopped having like a lot of issues. Just I felt so much better. My skin did feel better, and found out that it wasn't very good for us. So all to say is, you have to listen to yourself. Our intuition, especially as new mothers, is incredibly, incredibly strong. So don't always listen to doctors. They don't always know what's best. They also told me that I couldn't be breastfeeding my 2.5-year-old through my pregnancy. So I'm glad that I listened to myself, because I had an amazing experience with that. And then I was tandem breastfeeding after, and it was amazing. And then I got into, I think it was when Junie was a few months old, I became vegan. And that was my biggest blessing. It has been nonstop, getting better and better ever since. So I thank breastfeeding so much for so many things, for so many reasons. It brought me a connection to my girls, they brought a connection to me that it's unexplainable. It's beautiful. They never had a separation anxiety. They felt very secure. And I'm so grateful that I was able to do it. So that's it. So I just want to encourage all new moms and moms to listen to yourself, and to also use this time to go deep and think about the world at large, because we do our most profound thinking in those wee hours of the morning or in the middle of the night. And so I hope this video was interesting for you, maybe helpful. If you have any questions, let me know. Thank you so much for watching. Mwah.